Welcome, everyone, to the Information's TITV. My name is Akash Pasricha. It is Monday, November 10th. We have got a great show lined up for you today. First up, we are comparing Anthropic and OpenAI's projections for the coming years. We're then talking to the founder and CEO of ShopMy, a creator e-commerce company that just raised new funds at a $1.5 billion valuation. We're also taking a closer look at how AI could help fight wildfires, and we are also bringing on AWS to talk about how to accelerate the adoption of AI agents. And finally, we are ending with a discussion I am really excited for around the James Bond-style security systems that are being built around AI data centers. It is a jam-packed show, and so let's get right on into things. Anthropic and OpenAI have both made some stunning revenue projections for their business, but a new story we published today takes a deeper look at how their margin structures could compare over the coming 3 years and why Anthropic could in some ways be more efficient. Joining me now is Sri Muppidi, who wrote the story. Sri, welcome to the show. It's great to have you.
Excited to be here.
So let's talk about Anthropic and OpenAI. We have done a lot of great reporting. You have done a lot of great reporting, I should say, on the company's revenue projections. And you had a new story today out that talks a little bit about their margin structure, about their compute processing. Tell us a little bit of what you found.
Of course. So last week, we wrote a story about Anthropic raising its revenue projections to be higher than before. So some of the findings that we found was that Anthropic projected to have $70 billion in revenue and $17 billion in cash in 2028 in its most optimistic projections. But that same year, OpenAI expects to generate about $100 billion. Anthropic also expects to be cash flow positive as soon as 2027 and generate about $3 billion in cash. Comparing it to OpenAI, OpenAI actually has $35 billion in cash burn in 2027 and won't be cash flow positive till 2030. As for efficiency, which was about today's story, we find that Anthropic's compute costs are actually much lower than OpenAI. For instance, this year, Anthropic expects to spend about $6 billion across compute for training and running its AI models, versus OpenAI expects to spend about $15 billion. And then by 2028, Anthropic expects to spend $27 billion versus OpenAI's $111 billion, which also includes about $40 billion in backup servers that OpenAI has reserved for any unexpected breakthroughs or viral product hits.
And do we have a sense as to why their strategies are differing so much?
Yeah, I think part of the reason could be the different types of customers that both companies serve. So, for example, Anthropic serves roughly 80% of its, or makes about 80% of its revenue from selling its API or AI models through an API to its business customers, versus OpenAI generates a vast majority of its revenue from ChatGPT, many of which users are actually free users. The second piece could also be just the fact that OpenAI or Anthropic, for example, has a different type of chips that they use. For example, they use NVIDIA, Amazon, and Google chips, versus OpenAI primarily uses NVIDIA chips. And because Anthropic leaders also say that they match those chips to specific tasks, that could also be helping towards driving down compute costs as compared to OpenAI. And the last piece I'll just add is that, as I mentioned, to the types of customers that OpenAI and Anthropic respectively serve, OpenAI's R&D costs are across many different types of bets. For example, we had recently reported about an AI music model that OpenAI might be working on. And so I think that really points to the diversity in types of products and research that OpenAI is working on as compared to Anthropic.
And at a more fundamental level, one of the things that we've talked about on this show is OpenAI's broad strategy here with a number of different products, whether it's the browsers, the agents, the social media side of things with the generative video features. I mean, OpenAI really is going for what seems like world domination in some senses. Anthropic's mission seems to be a little bit more focused. And so I wonder, this strategy that you've sort of helped us unearth with respect to financials, is this reflective of Anthropic just saying, hey, we want to be a little bit more narrow with our focus? Or is it OpenAI saying we want to do everything? Help us understand sort of which side of that is more dominant here.
I think we see that with the types of products that both companies have released, and also just where a lot of the revenue seems to be coming. As I mentioned, Anthropic generates 80% of its revenue from business customers of it through its API, versus OpenAI has a vast majority of it coming from ChatGPT. Other areas that OpenAI has also said that it could generate revenue from is like new products or free user monetization, which we've learned to potentially be advertising or affiliate fees. So there is a diversity in the way that OpenAI expects to generate money, but also the types of research that we're seeing OpenAI work on, as I mentioned, around like music and browser technology and things like that.
How often do projections like these end up changing?
I would say that companies probably are doing quarterly projections, but these projections that we had reported on are from over the summer. And so
Right.
even just in the last couple of months, like it's likely that OpenAI and Anthropic's compute spending has gone up. I know, for example, Anthropic has a number of unsigned deals that haven't been announced yet. And OpenAI, as we know, has signed 1.4 trillion in deals just to boost its compute access. And so these projections have likely gone up, and compute spending is probably higher than what we even reported on.
But even still, this seems to bode pretty well for Anthropic's fundraising efforts, should they sort of be marching towards that.
Yeah, last week we had reported that if Anthropic were to raise, just given that they had increased their revenue projections from the last fundraise process earlier this year, Anthropic could raise at a valuation of between 300 and 400 billion, and that's a step up from its last valuation. So I think that these projections are really helpful for investors to know what's up with both companies and decide if they want to invest at the time.
Great. Well, Sri, I want to thank you for coming on. It's a fast moving story, and we'll have you on again when you've got more to share with us.
Thanks.
Okay. The creator economy and e-commerce sectors are becoming increasingly intertwined, and businesses building at the intersection of these two industries are getting a lot more attention from investors. ShopMy is one company in that category. The curated creator e-commerce company raised $70 million last month at a $1.5 billion valuation. Joining me now is Rein, founder and CEO of the company. Harry, welcome to TITV. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having me. I'm a big fan of what you guys do with the information, so it's an honor.
Well, thanks a lot. I've been looking on your platform for some new outfits that I can wear. I know that there's a lot of selection, and I know that the creators have a lot of options for me. So I also am watching what you do. Let's talk about ShopMy. Tell us, for those of us who aren't familiar, who does the company sell to? What is the actual product? How do you make money? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, I love it. So we're building the infrastructure for the future of curated commerce. We serve three different stakeholders. First is obviously content creators. We help them get paid promoting the products they love. The way they do that is through affiliate links, these digital storefront products that we built, as well as brand partnerships. Second piece is we serve brands directly. So we give them everything they need to build a world-class creator marketing program. So that's everything from discovering talent based on data, that's gifting, that's affiliate tracking, social listening, performance tooling, everything you might imagine. And that's really our bread and butter as a SaaS product for brands. The third piece is now we've involved shoppers. So we're giving them a shopping experience, incredibly well-structured, easy way to shop the recommendations of these top curators.
And how much revenue are you guys generating right now?
We've been on kind of a tear the last couple of years. So we ended 2 years ago about 4 million in revenue. Last year, 27. This year, we'll end about 80. We were driving about $1 billion in GMV to our brand partners. We have about 200,000 content creators on the platform. 10 million shoppers shop each month. Things have been kind of explosive, and I think it's just indicative of the way that shopping's changing, and the commerce landscape's obviously overwhelming, and this idea of this curator layer taking the massive amount of options and filtering it down for the end consumer has been like a really powerful force in commerce.
And so $80 million in 2025, that's where you're expecting to end the year, and you're profitable?
Yeah, we've been profitable since 2024. So obvious question is, why do we raise? I think the answer is the opportunity here is so big. This commerce is shaking up so massively with LLMs, with AI, and we think humans and taste play a big role in that future, and we kind of want to own that lane.
And so own that lane. So what do you plan to spend the money on?
Yeah, there's a few things. So it might be helpful actually to take a step back and talk about kind of how we got to the $1.5 billion valuation and
Yeah.
what we've changed in the market. So if you think of the last 10 years, put yourself in the shoes of a brand, there's been two real ways to grow from a marketing standpoint. One is creator marketing. And the value of creator marketing is it's very authentic. You're selling through content creators that have a relationship with their audience, but it's hard to scale because you're working with people, and inherently working with people is hard to kind of allocate meaningful budget. The second option is performance marketing, right? So you build a couple ads, you can experiment incredibly well, and it scales very effectively. So you can put in millions of dollars a month and see direct ROI. Downside, not authentic. It's someone making an ad about themselves, pushing out like, hey, look at me, look at my new product. So
Mm.
what we've done is taken kind of the best of both worlds, and we're effectively calling creator performance marketing, which allows you to scale at the scale of performance marketing while maintaining it authentic. And the way we do that is through we track everything automatically. We have a price and budget allocation engine to figure out what creators you should work with, how much you should pay them. So it scales incredibly effectively. And I think any brand that we work with that has really leaned in has seen it become their real dominant new channel.
When you talk about scaling, though, one of the things I noticed is that one of the ways in which ShopMy differentiates itself from something like a TikTok shop is you guys are a lot more upmarket in terms of the products that you seem to be advertising with your brands and creators. How do you sort of think about scaling then if it's sort of a narrow set of products, but then also it's sort of limited by the number of creators that are available to tout these products, right?
Yeah, yeah. I would say we work in the product space where it requires taste and a level of human trust. So that's anything that you put on your body, anything you like, your what you wear, how you decorate your house. The TikTok shop is kind of more like lower end products, quick impulsive buys. This is a much more intentional, thoughtful world, and it's enormous. I mean, the amount people spend on things that require taste is massive. You're right that we're limited by the number of curators, and I think like one of the main things we're spending money on here is to try to expand that creator pool and serve more of the brand's budgets that they're trying to
Hmm.
allocate.
Are you concerned at all with this shift towards people turning to chatbots to find recommendations for products and the idea that we used to use creators and we still do. I'm not saying it's gone away entirely, but there is a bit of a discussion around, hey, could people turn more to ChatGPT to find recommendations rather than turning to creators? Are you worried about that at all?
Yeah, it's a great point, and I think there's kind of two forms of shopping in that sense. One is what we call hunt-based shopping, which is I know exactly what I want. I need to go find it. High-rise black jeans. LLMs are phenomenal at that. They're going to find you exactly what you want. The other side is what we focus on is more the gatherers, where it's I'm going out in the world, I'm finding things that you might be interested in buying and bringing them to you. You can't really start that with the chat because you don't know what it is. So
Hmm.
it's exploratory gathering form that we're celebrating and helping bring into a platform.
Now, you mostly sell, you said, to the brands and to the creators. You also talked about sort of targeting the consumers. I tried to register for the app actually over the weekend, and so I see that there needs to be sort of an invite process, or I got to apply. And so the way I understand it, there's no actual consumer facing app right now, right? Are you thinking about
Yeah,
going into that space?
we are 2 weeks away. So unfortunately,
Oh,
it's 2 weeks from now, but stay
well,
tuned.
what's coming in two
Yeah.
weeks? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we're launching our app. We're really excited about it. It's for shoppers to consume the recommendations of these tastemakers. It's an incredible platform. You can wish list things, favorite things, get a feed, search the feed through all the obviously AI LLM tactics. Um, yeah, it's amazing. I can't wait.
So then, how do you think about then competing with all these social media platforms, which are the discovery engines?
This is the intention is never to bring the creators off of those platforms. They still post through those channels. We just aggregate behind the scenes. Our intention with the app is not to be a new entertainment destination. It's to be a shopping site built just for you. So you're choosing which curators make up your recommendations, and then you get what is feels like a pretty general commerce experience with all the like kind of amazing parts that you can build into a custom app. And it's clean, it's awesome. So it's when you're actually looking to buy something, you can come and say, all right, I already have 15 people I trust. Let me search for a summer dress or whatever you're looking for and get
Right.
that recommendation that you know you're going to like ahead of time.
Great. Well, Harry, I'm looking forward to seeing that app, and congrats on the fundraise, and we'll have you back on the show again soon.
Thank you so much.
Okay. A new startup is tackling a big challenge to reduce the frequency and severity of wildfires. Seneca recently launched with a $60 million financing round. It is building an autonomous fire suppression system that uses AI to stop fires and cut response times to under 10 minutes. Joining me now to discuss this is the company's founder and CEO, Stuart Landesberg. Stuart, welcome to the show. It's great to have you.
Thanks so much for having me.
So talk to me about how you got so attached to the mission here and what your company actually does.
So Seneca makes autonomous early response systems. And fundamentally, what we try to do is focus on use cases that today are inefficient, unsafe, or impossible for firefighters with existing technology. Our first product in practice is a fleet of 5 autonomous suppression copters. You can call them drones, but they're very large, weigh 250 pounds each. Each carries over 100 pounds of Class A foam, and they can respond earlier than is possible today, hopefully getting to fires within 5 or 10 minutes, and that can keep them from spreading. They can access places that are hard to reach or really dangerous for firefighters, and they can operate in situations that are really inefficient for firefighters today, giving sort of a force multiplication effect to folks on the front lines.
And so these are large drones. I've seen them. You kind of put them on a back of a pickup truck, and they're bigger than sort of the remote control ones that we've seen sometimes on Instagram. How many of these have you sold?
So we're not talking specifically about numbers, but we do have a number of fire agencies who've agreed to deploy them next year. And we think about them as going in a group of 5. And the magic of a group of 5 is that across 5 aircraft, and you're right, they're sort of like the average of your little hobby drone and a large helicopter. Across a group of 5, you can get about as much suppression power as a wildland fire engine. And there's something too, if you can get that there in the first 5 to 10 minutes post detection, our modeling shows that you can stop even a 95% risk fire, or at least give the ground troops enough time to get there to prevent real devastation.
So if we're not talking about how many have you sold, then how many agencies are using it? Just give me a sense of scale. Who are the customers?
So our customers today fall into 3 major groups. They're fire agencies, some of the most forward-thinking folks in the country. We've already talked publicly about partnerships with San Bernardino, the largest county in the country with over 20,000 square miles in their jurisdiction in Southern California, obviously very close to our friends in the Palisades last year. We've talked about flying with agencies across the Mountain West, including Aspen, Colorado, but we've flown this for dozens of agencies, thousands of missions across California, Wyoming, Montana, Colorado. And so expect to see it widely deployed in 2026 and even a broader scale in 2027. And then I'll speak quickly just beyond fire agencies. There's also utilities, developers, and various landowners who obviously have really think hard about making sure they have the right protection for their property.
And a bit of firefighting 101 here, because I don't know as much as I should, but the drones are big, but where does the water come from? I mean, they can't house that much water, I think, in them, right?
So the magic of 5 is that each of them comes preloaded with a little over 100 pounds. The capacity today is about 14 gallons. And when you use Class A foam and you spray it at really high pressure, the airflow actually sucks air in, and with the foam, you get what's called an expansion ratio of somewhere between 5 and 15 to 1. So 500 pounds will end up playing more like 2,500 to 5,000 pounds, which gets you to approximately the 500 gallons of suppression power you'd see in a wildland engine. So it may not be intuitive at first, but actually you get quite a bit of suppression power just from the payloads that's on board the aircraft.
I missed that part. So it's not actually water; it's a special foam that
Exactly.
is getting.
Exactly.
Okay. And now talk to me about the long-term vision here. I mean, firefighting, I don't know how big a market this is. I know the problem is getting worse, but in many ways, you're selling to the public sector in terms of them wanting to buy the technology. Are you also looking to sell more to the private sector? What is the long-term vision for the company?
So there are lots of stakeholders who care about this, right? Obviously, we've seen utilities. For many of them, this is an existential risk. stopping fire danger. But you also see everything from timber farmers to major developers who have got properties, high value properties in the wildland urban interface. But if you look at the long term, fundamentally, if we can't stop homes from burning down as a result of wildfire across the American West, we are going to lose home insurance across the American West, right? We're not going to socialize with the FAIR Plan and other things, the losses from wildfire. So we have to stop this problem. And so when I look out over the long term, I think of this as something that every single community that in a high risk place, which unfortunately much of the Western United States needs to be taking a proactive look at, because it is only a matter of time before we all start losing our insurance, which means we're going to start losing our mortgages, which is going to threaten the American way of life across half our country. So we look at this as an existential crisis for the American West, and one that technology can play a real role in solving. So it's exciting and passionate, and we're grateful to have terrific partners across public and private sectors.
Great. Well, Stuart, I really appreciate the work you're doing, and I really appreciate you coming on the show. Thanks for coming.
A pleasure. Back anytime.
Okay. Our next segment is with our presenting partner, Amazon Web Services. We have written a lot at the information about how challenging it is for businesses to adopt AI agents. And there's no one thing that makes it difficult, really. There are a multitude of issues that companies face every day. And so I want to bring on Shaown Nandi, a director at AWS, to help bring us a view from the ground on what these obstacles look like and how they can overcome them. Shaown, welcome back to the show. It's great to have you.
Gosh, it's good to see you, and such a fun topic.
Let's talk about agents. You know, I saw the report this morning, McKinsey actually put out this weekend, talking about AI adoption. And the headline of the report really was that a lot of companies have adopted AI. Scaling AI is a much different story, and it was a much smaller proportion there. And so I want to talk to you about what the challenges are scaling agents. What are the challenges that customers are telling you they're facing with respect to actually rolling this out across their entire companies?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, this is such a topically relevant concept because everyone's talking about it. We're seeing customers deploy these first agentic wins, and some customers are at a massive scale. But I think we're seeing a common thread of challenges. And maybe I'll first tell you how big it can be. I was with WPP on stage, well-known advertising, et cetera, technology now company. And they've deployed over 70,000 agents to production. So people can do this at massive scale. I think the challenge has been doing it at scale safely, securely, quickly, cost-effectively. And I'll just give you a really simple analogy, Akash, that I think will resonate with people, a human analogy almost. If you had the luxury of having a team of humans help you in life, which is what agentic's going to look like, you'd get a legal advisor, a financial advisor, maybe even a travel advisor, right? A planning advisor. You have all these advisors. And having one advisor is pretty easy. They keep their notes in their notebook. They call you. They know you pretty well. They have access to your stuff. But when you have a team, you got to think about, like, what access does everyone have? Does my travel advisor have access to my investment strategy? No, but they probably need some basic financial info. How do they share notes? And how do you constrain all these advisors? How do you make sure they're spending the right amount of time on things? And that's some of the challenge with scaling agentic, is looking at how do you deal with all, and I can break down those pieces for you in not technical, but in terms.
Yeah, I mean, look, what we've been hearing on the ground from our end here is one category of the problem is that the product itself needs a little bit of polishing. Another category is the predictability of costs. I mean, how do you even tell how much you need to spend on this stuff? I'm curious, in those two categories, which of those seems like a bigger problem right now?
Yeah, look, I'll put it in a couple ways. Most organizations built their data and their infrastructure and application foundations targeting maybe business intelligence and machine learning, even generative AI, but not agentic. And so the problems you laid out, the problems don't tend to be super technical in nature. We talked on a prior show about the people side of it and chief AI officers. But on this side, it's not cost on day one. Cost matters when you scale. Cost is what holds you back from getting really big, but not getting started. It probably is things like access and security and privacy that are pretty important, as well as how agentic is so different on distributed systems. So when you think about building an agent, you really need to think about how it might scale and access things. Like an agent might run for 5 hours, or it might run for 5 seconds, depending on the task. And when you ask agents to reason and think on your behalf, how many things do you want them to go out and touch? Do you want them to adopt the identity that you have as the user or like a super user? Do you want them to be able to create things on your behalf or draft them? Having all those guardrails, all of this is technically solvable today, Akash. I think where we've been focused helping customers is making sure customers don't reinvent how they do that. Because if you're sitting there building this foundational stuff, these guardrails, you're spending all your time on that, not in innovating.
What about? I do want to go back to what you were saying about the cost side here, though, because one of the things that I've been thinking about is, hey, you unleash this agent, you put it into your system, and you say, you're going to do the work for me. I mean, you don't know how much work it's going to take. You don't know how much compute it's going to use. I mean, conceivably, if I hire 10 people here today, they could stay until the wee hours of the morning. And, then you get into issues of overtime and stuff like that. How do you know how much an agent is going to cost you? How do you sort of constrain that issue?
I love that. I love that analogy, Akash. You nailed it. And look, this is not a new concept, even though it feels new. When cloud started, cloud has been around 19 plus years at this point. And when cloud got to the enterprise, all these CFOs are like, what if all my developers spin up things in the cloud? How do I make sure they don't run them forever? They're not too big. And we had to build cloud cost management practices. We often call it FinOps. That same concept, the business concepts apply perfectly well to agents. Understanding variable cost consumption and how you measure and metric it. From a technology perspective, what our customers are asking for is, how do I get better telemetry? How do I know how much resource an agent's consuming in real time? How do I get alarm bells when it's consuming too much? How do I think up front about, like I mentioned, a travel advisor to you? Look, if you ask a travel advisor for the best things to do in Paris, they could research it on the web, or they could fly to Paris, go visit 20 restaurants, eat 20 meals and build that back to you, right? So having guardrails up front that defines what the agent is allowed and not allowed to do. So there's two techniques. One, when you pilot, you build things more narrowly. You can always broaden them later. So while agents are capable of so much, you often start them on simpler and bounded tasks, and then you grow them by adding a second agent or adding capability. That's part A. Part B is the underpinning. So we have a great set of offerings called Agent Core. It addresses runtime and security and privacy. But one of those modules in Agent Core is all about observability. And whichever you use, open source tooling, our tooling, you need to make sure when you build these agents for production versus pilot, you're putting those observability hooks in that has that telemetry coming back. So your teams can see it, or better yet, a smart agent can watch the other agent. That's actually very doable.
What about security? How much of a risk is security for agents? We haven't talked much about that on the show.
Look, there's two things here you need to think about. First, there's all the underlying underpinnings. Like, is the model that you built, is the data access done right? You've talked about that in the generative AI world for a couple of years now. So you need solutions that are built for enterprise-grade security and privacy from day one, not like bolted on afterward. That's why you don't see the consumer-oriented agentic solutions go to the enterprise. You see built from enterprise ones. But part two, identity. Identity really matters. So for an agent to be powerful, you want to give it lots of access, but that adds inherent risk. So you lock down agents in two ways. You first decide there are guardrails you can put around it. There's a lot of pre-built systems for this that restrict what the agents can do, number one. And number two, you gate its access to systems. If you give an agent access to an order system, an ERP system to place orders, great. You don't have to give it access on day one to submit the orders. It can just draft them. And so you can do these things, and we have tooling to do that. It's very important. I always say to folks, think big, act small. Imagine all the things an agent can do in enterprise, but get started scoped with the right underpinnings.
Well, Shaown, it's an interesting topic and one that clearly everyone is talking about. Thanks so much for coming on the show. We appreciate it. We'll see you again very soon.
Good to see you, Akash. Talk to you soon.
Okay. Speaking of security, one of our latest feature stories at The Information took a deep dive into the James Bond-style security consultants that have seen a lot of demand lately for data centers as they become more and more crucial to the success of AI companies. I want to bring on Jemima McEvoy, our weekend and features reporter, who wrote that story over the weekend to tell us more about this trend. Jemima, welcome to the show. It's great to have you back.
Hi, Akash. Thanks for having me.
So let's talk about James Bond and about data centers and about AI. I didn't think James Bond would meet AI, and yet here we are, and that's probably going to be the premise of at least a few new movies that are coming out. But talk to me about the security consultant world and just how much demand these new people are seeing.
Yeah, so obviously you mentioned how data centers have been so crucial in the AI build out. a recent report by McKinsey predicted that spending on data centers will reach nearly $7 trillion in the next 5 years. And data centers are just popping up everywhere, not just in the US, but around the world. Of course, they're storing so much crucial information, so much crucial data that there needs to be thought into how these facilities are protected. So in the shadow of this huge build out, there has been this booming cottage industry of security consultants. They're called red teaming consultants, whose job is to stress test these facilities and check whether they would stand up against a criminal if they were to attack the center. So it's an industry that has been growing rapidly. A few data points. There's this one company called Securitas that has a data center division. They started 4 years ago, now has 16,000 people working for it. Another company that we featured, Guidepost Solutions, they did a lot of airport and detention center security testing, and now they say 80% of their infrastructure division is focused on data centers. So it's really just a hugely growing industry.
And what exactly is the risk here? I mean, who is hacking data centers? Who is trying to break into them? What are the risks here? Tell us a little bit about that.
Right. So that's kind of the question is anybody actually doing this and who would want to? And the answer is there's a lot of people who want this data inside of these facilities. I mean, some of the threats that were highlighted to me were, potentially different countries. There's domestic terrorists, perhaps activists. A big thing that was emphasized to me is as data centers are kind of a little controversial, there's been a lot of reporting about the environmental impacts and environmental stresses of data centers. There's growing local activism against that. And so one of the biggest threats that's been highlighted is that these would become potential breaches of the centers. And then those are kind of the main things there.
And so if those are the risks, then are there any novel ways that these companies and consultants are coming up with in terms of how to protect against the risks? What are some of the tactics that they're actually using? You talked about red teaming.
Yeah, I mean, just to quickly add to my last point, actually, there's a threat that the center would be destroyed, and that would be very expensive for companies. But the biggest threat is that somebody would be able to steal the data inside. For example, one expert highlighted to me that the technology in Anthropic's models could be used to help create a bioweapon. So if that ended up in the wrong hands, that would obviously be very bad. As to how security consultants are actually protecting these facilities, it's very interesting. This is kind of the fun part of the story, is they basically act, as you said, like these James Bond style consultants. They will figure out how they could break into the data center and conduct these tests, whether it's in the middle of the night or in the middle of the morning. They will, for several days beforehand, be strolling around the perimeter looking for ways they could get in, holes in the fence. They'll scale the fences, jump in, and try to break into the data centers through various methods, whether that's pretending to be, an Amazon delivery driver, whether that is, joining the group of employees smoking outside the data center and pretending to be one of them. They'll do all of this, surveillance to figure out how they might get in. And sometimes they do, and they'll feed
I was
them.
going to say, I wondered how many of these fake operations actually end up in sort of Revelation saying, "Oh my God, we totally missed that hole."
A fair amount do, which is kind of the interesting and somewhat scary part of it, and
Right.
the need for the industry. But it's
And one of the interesting things you talked about in the story is that these are actually former FBI folks that these companies are actually hiring to sort of be part of these red teaming initiatives.
Yeah, it's really a mix of people. There are definitely, FBI, CIA, ex-military professionals. On the other end, these experts who run these companies highlighted that they don't just want ex-FBI, they want regular people to see whether, like a activist who's done a bit of research on a facility, whether they could break in. So it's not ex-CIA, it's also, ex-engineer, person who worked a regular corporate job, now professionally breaking into data centers.
Right. So a big picture, Jemima, as you looked at the data center space and you looked at the security side of it, one of the interesting things that we've seen is when there is a boom in a technology, there is a boom in all the adjacent technologies. Here we're seeing the security risk. I wonder if you had any broad reflections around the data center space or just how vast this ecosystem is getting. I mean, today it's security, tomorrow it could be another cottage industry of, I mean, we've talked all about the power and the water. That's hardly a cottage industry. That's going to be a big part of this story. Did you have any sort of broader reflections about just how big this ecosystem is getting?
Yes, of course. I mean, I'd never heard before the story. I'd never heard of this industry, never thought about it before. There's probably many, many different industries servicing the data center space that are doing the same thing. I mean, another reflection, though, is just how quickly these facilities are being built out and how little we know about, the potential risks to them. And the fact that construction is happening creates lots of vulnerabilities. So I think that was another reflection I had too, is just how, we don't know. This is an unprecedented moment, and we don't know threats and risks and all of the different things we need to protect these data centers.
Great. Well, Jemima, it was a very interesting story, and I was excited that you wrote it. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and I look forward to your next piece.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, well, that does it for today's show. A reminder, we are on this stream Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. I want to thank Amazon Web Services, who is our presenting sponsor for this production. And I want to thank you for tuning in. We really do appreciate your viewership. I'm already excited for our next show tomorrow. Have a great rest of your Monday. Bye-bye for now.